Welcome to the presentation about the new moon Aries 2950 degrees on April 2023, which also happened to be a solar eclipse. I wanted to do this presentation because it looks like on a personal level, the Mars functions are very important for me, and then probably I will be able to explain this in what way during the presentation. But now I want to focus on that. We know that the eclipses are very important times of the year where the energies are very intensified and where the new moons or the full moons are falling very close to the nodal axis points. So that's what makes that energy very intensified. And because we are in connection with the cosmos and we're in connection with those energies, and they have a representation in an archetypal level in our own lives, we want to see, and it's very important to see where exactly and what is the call in our own personal lives that is related to those energies. And this was the reason for that presentation. It had a very major influence in my life, and I wanted to see and talk about that. So the reason why, of course, this presentation has this name, The Call of the Wild, is because we're going to be talking about Aryan energy. And I'm going to go a little further in my slide order so that we can kind of get the idea, not that we don't know, but visceral idea of what the Aryan energy is, because of course that solar eclipse happened to be in Aries, not only in Aries, but in 29 degrees and 50 minutes of Aries. So this is from a previous presentation that I had on Mars. And so just intuitively speaking, and having this work on our subconscious, if we wish, what is the Aryan energy and what is it connected to? So in order for us to understand the Aryan energy from the core, it's important to see where the energy is coming from, the previous sign, the next sign, and also the sign that's opposing to Aries. So we know the previous sign of Aries is Pisces. Pisces is the area where some of us call God, some of us call collective spirit and all that. So what's characteristical of that energy is everything is allowed, everything is contained in there. Every possibility, every idea, every image, everything that we can conceive of. And in this place, we feel like we're accepted. We feel like we're part of the collective. So next sign is Aries, and it needs to do something. It needs to come out of this place and has an experience, has a freedom for that experience. It needs individuation. It doesn't need to have anything to do with this place anymore. It's by itself. It needs expression. It needs identity. So when Aries starts acting, it doesn't necessarily knows what the product of the acting will be. The very idea is for the act and for the impulse to have a freedom to express itself. So we know we start from something that we don't know what it is, but it's contained within its idea as a seed, for example. And then there is a sprout. In order for this sprout to start growing, it needs to have energy within it. It's an impulse, it's an instinct. We talk about emergence, action, reaction, of course, to that instinct and to whatever happens and to whatever the initiated action is. And then there is an energy, has to have energy. Otherwise, it's so difficult to pull away from this cozy place of the collective. And so it necessarily needs freedom for that individuation. But what's important also to intuit is that within that seed, pretty much all the seeds look the same, but within that seed, we also have the idea that we cannot have a pine tree coming from an oak seed. So there is an idea of what that final product will be. It's very intrinsic to the initial seed. So The Call of the Wild is actually a book that was published long time ago. And in the culture that we live in, and probably the times we live in, reading books is not that popular. But for the people that know and for the people that don't know, It's about this dog that used to live in California, and it got stolen, and it was sold to be a sled dog in Alaska during the gold rush. So just there, we see the difference in the conditions. And of course, it had its own hardship experiences constantly after this happened. But slowly and gradually, it became progressively more primitive and wild in that harsh environment. And the dog was forced to fight for its survival. And it had to dominate other dogs, of course. But again, with the experiences, the wilderness came through that creature, and slowly again and gradually, because of the circumstances, um, all the veneer of the civilization that it was used to through this experience was shed away. And then eventually it started relying on those primordial instincts. There was an ancestry calls, and it learned through the experience how to merge with the nature, and eventually emerged as a leader of the wild in the wild. So we all have this archetypal process within us. And we talk about Aries again, and we talk about this not conditioned energy that is deeply within us. It shows up in particular area of our life. It has active component to it, which would be the Mars in our charts. And we have a collective call, an individual call that happens to happen in the very, very last degree of Aries, 29 degree and 50 minutes. We have 10 minutes away from moving to another sign. It's almost like the last place where we have the opportunity to do the action, or the last place where the last time, the last moment where we can look back and see what was coming in terms of what is a very individual and authentic action. Where is the area where we couldn't do that before? What was the reason why we were not able to do that before? So I'm going to go briefly to talk about the moon, because we're talking about the moon being in that sign, and also the Mars, because it's the archetypal active ingredient of that Aryan consciousness or Aryan archetype. So the moon, we know, and this is all coming from the teachings of Jeffrey Wolf Green. When we talk about the moon, we're not talking about something that's out there. It's us. It's our ego structure in a good way. It's a self-image. And that's how we know ourselves. That's how, through that self-image, we get to know our soul. Because the soul has to create that image in order to be able to experience the 3D reality. So, and it's also the way we feel on a day-to-day basis, how we refer to ourselves on an everyday basis inwardly. And we also, through that function of our own psyche, we're able to give personal form and definition of the reality. So imagine we have 3 different people, and we're at bazaar, and we're actually looking at different books, and we want to purchase a book. And we're looking at the stand, and there's those books, and we pick up the book and we start reading just because we want to see what's inside. And so the person behind the stand doesn't want to have these books all messed up, so they tell us that we shouldn't pick up the book, or we should put the book down because we're bending the pages and it's not going to get sold out. So this is a situation, just experiential situation example. There's 3 people there. Imagine. So one reaction could be, oh, I understand this person is having a bad time, so I'm just going to have him or have her had this bad time. I can say, okay, never mind. I'm going to put the book down. Have a good day. That's through my interpretation of reality. Another person can actually get offended, put the book down and forget about this place and be offended all day long. And if you ask him what's happening, they may say, oh, this was a horrible person, and they thought that I'm stupid because I don't know how to handle books. This is another interpretation of reality and the reaction to that interpretation. And then, of course, you can only imagine how many more there could be. This is the way we actually give the personal form and definition to the reality. And our actions depend on that too, how we're going to act based on that definition. Also, through that function of the moon, we're creating, it's creating its own insecurity, right? And that's because of the constant ongoing tension between the North Node and the South Node. South Node, what's coming from the past, and the North Node, what's the evolutionary intent. So it's necessarily so. It needs to be that way because it needs to be able to ultimately release security from within that is linked to our inner reality, not the reality that's independent on the external reality. So if we think about how we interpret the reality, we always interpret the reality based on some past conditioning. So we have to talk a little bit about Mars too, because it's the way we act. We cannot differentiate ourselves from our Mars function, because even if we need to stand up and get a glass of water, that's our Martian function too. And so what Mars acts upon is it's actually the desired nature, of course, and it's because our soul's evolution is based on our desires. We can only think of how many times we were not able to act upon our desires. And of course, we're not talking about desires that are harming life or abusing life, or we're talking about pure desires that are emanating from deep within, that the fulfillment of which we think is going to make us happy. So that function in us, the Martian function, is instinctually registering those desires, and they're emanating from the unconscious. The problem with this is that our unconscious settings contain also situations and experiences where the things have gone wrong and we were not able to express those desires, so we know what the consequences were. And because Mars is picking up those desires through the function of Pluto, the unconscious, we have to just check on that too, that Pluto is the nature of the soul's evolutionary intention and desires before this life. So our unconscious contains all these memories on a cellular memory, not necessarily vivid memories, and of course the ego structures that have operated in order to work those desires. So ultimately Pluto, of course, and the moon correlates to our needs for security, because over the many lifetimes and over the last, I don't know how many thousands of years, we're living in societies where insecurity has been established as a normality. So we are actually need to feel secure more than ever. And because of certain experiences, whether it's going to be past lives or in this life, early in childhood, we have adapted certain dynamics, or we have become used to certain dynamics that are not necessarily healthy for us, but they constitute a sense of security because they have been repeating themselves and they're predictable for us. So that also is something that is emanating from deep within, and we're acting upon it. So if I know that if early in life I've been told that I cannot go ahead and do what I want, again, we're not talking about horrible things. We're talking about, oh, I want to go to the library and read the book. Well, you can't go to the library because you have to take care of your little sister. That happens over and over again, not necessarily with the library, but with the other examples in terms of what I naturally want to go and I want to read this book. So I would know that every time I want to go and do something, the conditioning will develop that what's the point? I know that I have work to do. Why would I? It's not going to be possible anyway. So this settles in, and then I will know when I grow up that the most important thing is what I'm obligated to do, not what I really want to do. And our actions are going to be geared towards that type of mentality. And every time I'm going to feel the urge, moon, to do something that I want to do, the repetition of the previous dynamic will kick in. And because I'm used to it, I will think, and the new thing to go and act upon my desires is going to be scary just because I haven't developed the habit to do it. Then I will naturally and easily recede back to that pattern and just not go ahead and do it. So this is something that I came up with, and I hope it's helpful. But this is the way I wanted to exemplify how we end up in our lives repeating situations and patterns of behavior that are not necessarily good for us, but it's almost like they're out of our control. So, of course, the deep sense of security that comes from previous experiences, not necessarily good for us, but we're used to them. Pluto, through the South Node and the South Node ruler, are actually really, this is what the Mars is speaking through, and this is what Mars instinctually does. And of course, that's connected to the sense of security that has to do with the moon. But imagine that we are very afraid that if we go to an exam, we're going to get a C or D, and it's not going to be a passing exam. And so because we're so afraid of it, because that has happened in the past, we're going to think that, well, we're never going to pass this exam, so why would we try it? So instead of going to the exam, I'm just going to not go to the exam, and I will not do anything different. So that will only bring back the same reality in which I am. So that creates a loop. And I keep repeating the same situations, or I keep meeting the same type of people, just different faces or different scenarios over and over again, where nothing moves. And I feel like I'm doomed. And if I pick up the wrong book, it's going to tell me that this is karmic and I should stay in it. So what brings the new reality is the very beautiful fact that on everyday basis, we're experiencing the constant pull between the south node dynamic and the north node dynamic. Because deep within the seed that comes here in this life, we know what the evolutionary intent is. We know that we need to move in a different direction. But even though this is scary and many times we can just recede to do the same behavior over and over again, there is something out there that's calling us to do something new. And so this constant push between what I'm doing and what I want to be doing is going to be the very thing that is pushing the moon to have a different reaction. And so when we start adapting the behavior and the of the North Node, whatever the North Node is and what it signifies, through the North Node ruler, the specifics of how this could be done, and we start more to be more secure within that, then naturally, it's not like we're going to forget about the South Node dynamics. This is absolutely impossible because we're talking about one axis, and that axis cannot disappear. Like if we adopt one part of the axis, it doesn't mean that the other, we're going to disconnect from the other. We're actually going to transform that past dynamic, or we're going to have a different reflection on it. So the new behavior that we're adapting changes our reality because we're acting in a different way. The problem is, what is it that prevents us from the acting? So, of course, there's always a fear involved. And before we look at the fear, and that's going to happen through the charts, this is the last slide before we go into charts. And considering of what's been said so far, I just wanted to give you, it's almost like a food for thought or for reflection. There was a solar eclipse on April 19 of 2004, and it was 2959, if I'm not mistaken. It's definitely 2950. I'm not sure if it was 59 or 50 something else. but it was pretty much on the same place. So it's important to ponder. I know it's not easy to just go immediately into 2004, April 19, plus minus several months, but just thinking about what actions did you take then, or did you not take then? And in what area of life? And also what were or still are the consequences of that action or inaction or particular type of action. And also, because of the way we acted then in that area of life, what reality did you lock into yourself into as a result? Because of course, every action provides us in a particular reality, and that reality is facing us. We cannot escape. And so this is the Saturnian function, where we know that the Saturn has to do with the structuring our consciousness. What does that mean? Like we all know, for example, I'm going on a tangent here, but I'm going to be right back soon. We know about the Saturn returns, right? And it's interesting how it has become a like very, very common into the normal language, Saturn return. People know about Saturn return. People are so afraid of Saturn return because they've heard horrible stories. What is a Saturn return, if you think about it? We live our life up to that point, and we have certain ideas of what we are and what we stand for and all that. But then, for some of us, not all of us, all of a sudden this reality comes up. We find ourselves in that reality, and that reality is we're talking about reality that we not necessarily like. But so what happens in those situations is there is what we see in front of us when we find ourselves in a situation or predicament or whatever, and we don't like it. It's just an opportunity for us to see certain features of ourselves that brought us into that situation. So we are put in that place where we have to become conscious of those traits that produce that reality. And those traits are within us, whether it's going to be a fear, or it's going to be inability to act, or inability to stand for ourselves, or inability to go for whatever. It could be anything. So it's almost like our Saturnian function has produced that reality because there were certain things that we were unaware of. And those things are what actually produce that reality. So we cannot escape it. We can see it, and we can reflect on it, and we can see how we can change it. So this is an interesting just reflection that people may want to do. It definitely rang a lot of bells for me when I went back to that place again, plus minus several months from that date. So we're gonna go to charts, and I'm gonna skip the first chart because I don't think that the person is here. And I think the second chart is Kara's chart, right? Yeah. So I'm using astro.com. I just decided to do that. And the only thing with astro.com is that they don't list the south node, but we know that the south node is always 180 degrees opposite. So Kara, do you, because I know that you have those planets on the cusps, some of them, is that how you usually refer to your chart? Because that's porphyry, but if you feel like Neptune should be in the 8th, or Jupiter should be
nope, that looks like the one that I use.
Okay, all right.
It's interesting that you mentioned Saturn return, because in 2004 was my Saturn return year, or the anyway.
2004 was just, oh, okay, okay, yeah, mine was.
It was a pretty good year for me.
Yeah, good. Well, that's good.
One of my better years, I suppose.
Mine was not. but I had an opportunity to reflect on it. But anyway, so
Well, Saturn rules my moon, so I'm usually pretty friendly with Saturn.
yeah, the whole 10th house. So obviously that's where the new moon falls in the first house. And so the questions that I was going to ask every one of you before we start is, and Kara, of course, this is for you, is there something that you are not happy with? Well, if that's a personal question, of course, you choose how much or to what extent or how deep to go with the answer. Is has there been not a situation, but have you find yourself in a state of dissatisfaction as far as the expression of your identity?
Yes, this has actually been an ongoing change. Pluto's been squaring my Chiron for a while.
Yeah.
So that was the impetus for my healing journey a couple years ago. So now that this eclipse happened right close, within 3 degrees.
Yeah.
It felt like something new definitely was coming. And I do see spots in myself now that I am dissatisfied with certain things that I'm looking to change.
Yeah.
It is that fear that comes in, especially with the Chiron wounding, when I want to initiate something.
Okay. So the other thing, so again, we were talking about the fact that it's happening at 29 degree, right, in 50 minutes. So it's almost like the possibility with this is because it's like the last, it's not the last time we can act, but it feels like what happens is it's almost like, okay, I can actually, sometimes we can find ourselves acting in a certain way that is different and that is absolutely not in control. And it's almost like this instinct is tired of us trying to curb it for all kinds of preconditioned reasons. And it just jumps out. And we find ourselves doing something that we've never done before, or we've never done it this way before. And it's almost like the first thing is, oh my God, what did I do? But then we realize that actually that's that's good. That's my identity. And then the question is, of course, what was stopping that impulse to go and express itself? And so for that to, I mean, explore, obviously there is this thing that's how it's supposed to be. And then you look back and you look at why this was not happening. And then all these other situations will come up just to see, oh, I could have done this here. I could have done that there. I could have, which is fine, which is good. I mean, usually there is sadness with that because, of course, now from the perspective of where we are, because we've gained all these experiences, and of course, our ego has become a little stronger, not ego in a bad way. So we can actually see that. And from that point, it's going to be difficult to stop doing it again because we don't experience that fear as strong as again. But let's talk about the fear. It's almost like it's the ultimate divine discontent. And I cannot do this anymore to myself because we're talking about the first house. And so where is the fear coming? And from, well, we have plenty to look at. We know the old patterns with Pluto, where the things have gone wrong through the South Node, through the ruler of the South Node. Uranus tells us where there's been, trauma and where this fragmentation has happened, where and it's also in a 29 degree, which is absolutely amazing in a way. Um, amazing, yeah. When you have to experience, it's not amazing, but it's again, it's the same point. It's the 29 degree. So you're getting up. I'm not telling you what you're doing, but it's the opportunity to be able to see the bigger picture there, and to get it, and how, these other people are not more important than me, and they're not the ones that are projecting onto me, and they're not the ones that are going to tell me who I am. And uh, the problem, so the fear comes, of course, from the cellular memory of whatever has happened, and of course how this has produced a deep belief as to what my truth is. Do I have a truth, or my truth comes from somebody else? And the combination of the cellular memory of something gone wrong, of course, we don't want to experience pain. And pain is not only physical, there's a lot of emotional pain, and even so, and the belief combined, because they stay in the unconscious, they're operating through, of course, Mars. So the house that Mars contains is where, if we're not holding on to that energy, and there's a reason I put Aries also in the charts, because it correlates, right, energetically to all this, the divine discontent. Again, I'm angry. I'm so angry. And it's okay to express anger. So and see how close it is to that. I mean, it's right on the, is it, yeah, a little, yeah, closer to the, it's very much on the ascendant. It's very much on this Jupiter, and Mars is very close to it. So what the area where we don't own this Martian energy, and if you think about the Martian energy, of course, how we act, how we fight for ourselves, how we act on behalf of our own desires. So that gets conditioned very early, and past lives too. But so if I, as I said, if I'm thirsty, I will go ahead, naturally. It's a natural instinct. Where the bottle of water is, you go and you pour water and you drink, and then everything is fine. So you don't have to think about it. But if you think that there's not going to be enough water, that you're not supposed to go get the water right now, or you're supposed to do something else and all that. So what happens is, first of all, you understand that, I mean, not understand it, but it gets deeply ingrained within you that just because you want water, that doesn't mean you're going to get it. There's no point of getting it. And also your body is experiencing certain things because it doesn't get what it needs to in order to function right. And so, but we know, because that's how we learn, because it was denied to us. We know that there is no point of doing this. Or if I want something, I better go do something else, because that's what I'm used to. It's been repeating for a long time. So on a very weird level, I'm used to that. And I keep doing it because it's something that I can expect. It gives me sense of security just because of that. And so the place in our life where we don't own this natural expression of the energy, it opens a potential. It's actually not a potential. It just happens for other people to abuse that energy. And that's where we feel depleted. That's where we feel that whatever we do, and so it's not gonna, whatever we do, however we apply ourselves, it's not gonna be enough, and we're always gonna be taken from. So obviously, when as I talked about this old Pluto South Node and all that, and Mars, what's happening in that fear, and the how we perceive fear, how we feel fear. We're going to a point where we're going to act on those, and we're talking about the Aryan energy and the Martian energy, because that moon was in that house, in that sign, and in that house. So I am to do something. I am to go and state what I am. Because that means that it doesn't mean, so to act on what's coming naturally from within means to act on our deep self. And it's the self that's connected to source. And that connection is natural, right? And we're here because we're supposed to express ourselves in that particular way, in Kara's way. You cannot express yourself in my way or Sue's way or anybody else's way. So just by that, you're loved by the source. That's a little, I mean, it's out there because it's not specific. But the way you know that is through the fact that when you're acting on what you want, you feel good. You feel good, right? You feel good and you feel no, you don't feel depletion of energy. You can do what you want and what you feel pleasure of doing. And you're not gonna check the time because the time goes and you end up doing it like for 5 hours and you're not tired. And that tells you that there is a normal open flow, and that flow is energy, and we're all energy, and that means that there is constant circulation, and that means we're opening the channels through which you're connected to that place, whatever that is. Of course, I'm not talking about God in terms of religion and all that. So families stifle that because their flow is already screwed up, or conditions or other situations from before. We used to and also the very fact that we're not accepted, the biggest fear of not being accepted, because as human beings we need to be accepted because we know that there is a cellular memory of being accepted because you're loved for who you are. That was the idea originally. And so when we're not accepted, we sever parts of ourselves in order to be accepted. And then the whole it's sad because that way we're accepted for something that we're not. And it's an illusion of acceptance. But you cannot, you cannot figure this on when you're a kid. It's very difficult because it's ultimately, and I excuse my language in advance, it's a mind fuck. So the fear, of course, we project the fear of something that has happened before. That's a tricky thing because what we're doing when we're projecting fear is that we're projecting it because one part of us is stuck in that experience from before. And it has a vivid memory of it. It's almost like, again, like fragmentation. What happens? One part of us is still there. And it's perceiving that this is going to happen because it's still there. That's the only reason it's perceiving it's going to happen, because there's no guarantee it's going to happen. And so
it's interesting that you say it that way, because that's exactly how I explain it when I talk to clients or when I'm thinking about it in myself. It's, and I actually just talked about this in my last meeting, that, that fracturing and trying to put those pieces back together is what part of the journey is. And yeah, I mean, obviously the fear for me, I think you can probably see it. My Mars is my Pluto polarity point. So Mars opposing Pluto is anytime I try to assert myself, do something that I want to do, I'm coming up against some kind of power source, or there's always some kind of power struggle that's saying, no, you can't do that, or no, you're not going to get what you want, or that information that's coming back to me from the Libra is the feedback of, you don't deserve to show up, you don't deserve to take up, or at least that was my conditioning. So that then has been my journey to learn how to just show up for myself. And doesn't matter, if people accept me or not, which, you're going to have that in life no matter what. Some people are going to like you, some people aren't, but
exactly.
it was just about 2 years ago that I started learning that. So, at my Uranus opposition, it finally kind of came together, but definitely the fear of, if I speak out, if I show up for myself, especially in a big way, Jupiter on my ascendant, here I am. And, the feedback that I received was, tone it down, be a good girl, all that kind of bullshit conditioning. Speak my language.
Yeah. Well, see
Yes.
that trine between well, because you're doing this work, but the Uranus and Mercury, the trine,
Mhm.
that's how easily it happens. Yeah, sure, okay, I will. But the thing is that, so the call right now, I mean, that urge, you've experienced it. So what was it, the different thing that you find yourself doing? Or
I
because
think it was interesting too that you mentioned anger, and that I think has been probably what has been coming up for me most recently,
Mhm.
um, since even a little bit before the eclipse, but just allowing myself to express the anger, obviously in a more healthy way, not directed at anyone, or just being able to admit to myself and say it out loud, I'm really angry right now.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
Feel it, but my conditioning was you had to say something else, like, oh, I'm hurt, my feelings are hurt, or I couldn't actually say, I'm really pissed off right now. I didn't have that, and so I think recently that's been what's been coming out for me. It's like, you know what, I really am angry about this, and I'm going to just let myself be mad for a while,
Yeah.
figure out, how to handle it and manage it and all that kind of good stuff. But yeah, it's interesting that you said it that way. And I think that probably has been the thing that I've been allowing myself to feel more lately.
Yeah, so yeah, and again, that Martian energy in the 12th house disappears. And so the anger, again, that's why I put the Aries in there. Anger, it's a healthy thing, and you don't have to express it in front of people, because when we have a history of not expressing anger, we are afraid just to think that I can kill people with that anger.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, but that's the thing. You don't have to express it in front of people. You can yell at the screen of the TV or the thing, just to, because what you're doing that way, you're actually, imagine the anger is an entity, and you're welcoming that entity that's part of you, and it's gonna tone it down only when it needs to say what it needs to say. And so it's actually a piece of you, right? That's one piece. And so that is also something that you may want to look at, in terms of just do stuff.
That really is a good practice. I started doing that with other emotions when I was, going through my healing journey, and I do it regularly, but I hadn't done it with the anger until more recently, where you really, like you said, separate it as an entity and ask it, what is it that you need to say to me? What is it that you need to express? What is it that I need to learn from you?
Yeah.
So, we can, move on with this or do whatever, how do we put this together? So
Because it has
usually it's a
story.
usually it comes down to a boundary. I mean, when I get angry, it's because there's a boundary that's been crossed that maybe I'm not even aware that that's a boundary for me. And so then I'm learning, okay, I need to set a boundary here.
Yes, I mean the Chiron in the first house. If the Aryan energy is not expressed, I mean the opposite sign is Libra. Of course, it's going to be open to all kinds of manipulation. That's the thing, manipulation. When we don't own the Martian energy, of course, somebody else is going to take care of it. It's energy. People are hungry for energy. We can call it money. We can call it whatever. It's energy. And energy attracts energy. So sometimes you actually, not you, everyone can find people that they're actually, well, they don't mean bad. They're not really necessarily, but they're very unconscious in the way they treat us, because they're literally attracted to the energy, and they take good use of it, which in its essence is manipulation. But of course, they may not know it. Some of them know it and all that. So, and of course, in our societies, that that is a place where we have been fed all kinds of wrong ideas, right? Because we're taught that you're not supposed to desire stuff. I mean, even the religious conditioning, and even if we're not really, um, going to church and all that, it's permeated our language. It's we use, how many times we use, let's say something's happening, I didn't get somewhere on time, or I'm late. I'm like, oh my God, I'm doomed. And where is this coming from? Doomed. The idea that you're doomed is a Christian idea, or maybe it's other religions I'm not familiar with, but doomed means something very strong. It means that there is no forgiveness for you, that you're going to be suffering for eternity. There's no eternity, but you don't even know that. But you're programming your body and your cells and all that. And it's just a saying, but it is, so our language is permeated.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because in 2004, when I was going through the beginning of my Saturn return that year, that was probably the year that I was the most devoted to my religious belief at the time. And I hadn't grown up with that. It was something that I chose on my own. But that was definitely when it became real solidified, and it was very important for me to connect to it that way. And now, coming back to the same point 19 years later or 20 years later, or 18 years, when the nodal, when the nodes are coming back to the same area, so we're looking at that year 2004, I'm changing my spiritual beliefs again. They're opening up in a different way. So it's interesting to watch the cycles, I think.
Yeah, and when you talk about spiritual beliefs, you see where the Jupiter falls in your chart. It's huge.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that is the whole goal. And it's almost like you can't. It's happening. It's happening. It's like
I mean, the messages. I'm pretty intuitive, and I just recently did I'm already a Reiki master, but I did a different style of Reiki. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's just it's energy work. So this particular one was activated by certain meditations, and as I was in meditation, what I heard was, start your spiritual practice again, because I had put it away for a while. And so it makes sense to me now in my Jupiter return year, that in this eclipse happening there, that it would activate that spiritual path again. And leading more into my intuition that I had put aside for a while.
Yeah, so it's a reclamation, and it's also it's almost like this primal brain or primal instinct that it's so used to being shoved down, and it has found a way to just go through all these shackles and to just spur like this. So and of course this is the beginning, so that will develop as it goes. And of course the more you become conscious of it, the more you can consciously engage into it. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think we can go to the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, and it's like I'm waiting for Sue to change the slides. Okay, so see you next. So what we're gonna see here, of course, is that the new moon falls into the 10th house, and of course, I'm gonna ask you the same question: is have you found yourself over whatever time to not be satisfied with something that pertains to the 10th house? Of course, we know that 10th house has to do with how you stand out there, your integrity, I mean, not meaning that you're not integral, but in terms of how it's stated out there and what are you doing, and your authority and all that, or something else. Have you find yourself in a state of dissatisfaction around those themes, or anything else that has to do with the 10th house?
Well, I can say pretty much I'm pretty happy with the way things are now. Of course, I'm a little older. I've already had my second Saturn return, and I've already had a career. And I was looking back. I was trying to think what was going on in 2004 with that, and I was probably I, was probably at the top of my career at that point, as in information technology. And I was in a man's world.
Yeah.
And that was very difficult because it was, they wanted to pat me on my head and, don't worry your pretty little head, just go away, and so I was always fighting to, to be, to have any kind of standing, in the world
Okay.
with them, and I was happy with my job per se, but I was not happy with the way I was treated and the way, the respect, that I felt like I had earned, but I wasn't getting.
From the authority figures or whatever was considered authority.
Right. And I was an authority, in what I was doing, but I wasn't acknowledged as such, by my bosses and, superiors, and they were superior. They made sure that they let me know that they were superior. And so now I feel like everything that I've done throughout my life, has brought me to where I am now, as far as being out in the world. And I can tell you that after, the day of the eclipse was the first day that I actually went out into the world, to a social gathering since the pandemic.
See, that's interesting. So you made yourself seen out there into the world. So did you find yourself that that's kind of a weird thing that you're doing, or it was just coming naturally? Or
It just
by surprise that you got out there?
no, it wasn't by surprise. It was actually I actually kind of chose it. It's a long story, but the eclipse. Okay, so you can see in my chart that the eclipses have been moving through my 5th and 11th house, and as a result of that, I've the probably the bottom line of those eclipses is that I've lost 3 friends, over that period of time. One of them passed away on April 19th, a year ago. And we had his celebration of life, and I'm the one that chose the date, on April 19th, and I chose it because there was an eclipse that day, and because, well, yeah, just because it was a year from, his passing, and it was time, and and so I, coordinated it, and went, and I was not uncomfortable. I was, I felt a little weird being out in the world again, but I did it.
Yeah, so that's again interesting. Well, it showed up that way, of course, but it has to do with this showing yourself out there. It's out there in the world. So when you're considering what's been said here, do you feel again, we're talking the Martian energy and how it has expressed itself over the years. So I know that you've gone through your 2nd Saturn return, but still, considering what's been, because again, the eclipse, because in the 29 degree and then in Aries, there is this action type oriented feel to it, but every action has to do with our Martian energy, right? So considering that the Mars in your chart is in the 5th house and it's in Scorpio, have you felt, or I mean, of course, that probably has not been the case from the very get-go, but it could have been. The fact that it's Scorpio talks about that probably there was not that much ability to hold and to own it at the very get-go. But how would you feel, not feel, but how would you say that the expression of your own creativity has been was expressed or has transformed over the years?
Well, that's another story as well. As you can see, my Mars is at the point where the eclipse is tomorrow, where the lunar eclipse is tomorrow, and Uranus has been opposite my Mars. So it's been a Mars awakening for me about, you know, it was very eye-opening for me to think about Mars ruling my midheaven, because I never thought that I was a Martian type person. In fact, for the longest time, I was using a time that was an hour difference, and it gave me a Pisces midheaven, and I was happy with that. And then when I found out my true birth date and my true birth time, and saw that, you know, Mars ruled my midheaven, I was a little taken aback, until I realized that what my job was, what has been, you know, most of my life, was kind of as a, a technology detective.
Right.
And but and in addition, it is square Pluto, so I was probably born angry, and I the anger was something that I would never, like Kara was saying, you know, we weren't allowed to be angry. You know, you just don't express that. And my mom, I grew up, you know, pissed at my mom for reasons I won't go into.
Right,
But she
right.
used to always try and get me to say that I was angry. Why I was angry? Well, I was angry at her, and it wouldn't do me any good to tell her, because she, you know, it fell on deaf ears. And so she was, I would say, I am not angry, I'm mad. You know, and, you know, anyway, so for years I've had, you know, anger and seething, you know, the Scorpio kind of seething anger that was internalized. And I probably, you know, I would say that maybe around 2004 is when I started um, acknowledging that I actually did have anger, and that I needed to get it out. And I started doing things like stomping around and screaming, and, you know, scaring my cats, and, you know.
That's interesting. So, okay, well, there is a release there that has happened, right?
Yeah.
And it was happening through the same thing. And it's interesting that you're saying that you were very happy with the Piscean midheaven, because you were not even realizing that the place you're finding yourself in is actually you're establishing that identity, and you're in constant fight there. I mean, whether that fight was not necessarily with words or whatever, but you said that you were in a male environment, and you were working a job that um, was not,
It was
anyway.
typically male. I mean, I was with, you know, almost everybody in the department. It was probably 85, maybe 90% males,
Mhm.
you know, so I had that energy all around me.
Yeah. So that's the release there, and so the cycle that something opened up at that 2004, whatever triggered it. So the when we're talking about, you know, your self-expression, because that Mars is in the fifth house, was it easy for you to find let's say, an outlet for that creativity? Did you?
Yes, yes, in some ways. And I had actually, previous to that, probably, um, uh, probably 12 years, no, probably 92, probably, well, maybe even the eclipse before that, maybe the eclipse season before that, which would have been in the 90s. I went back to school and studied art. Oh no, yeah, it was after. No, that would have been in the 80s, the time before that. So it was in between that, but it was when I got out of a career that I was miserable in, and started going to school, and I was able to study art for a period of time, and I loved it, and then I picked it up again in like maybe 8 years ago in a different way, and started doing printmaking, and then just very recently I have been gathering up all my art and getting it on a website.
Yeah. So there was the, again, coming back to that Martian energy and owning it. Yeah. So and that new moon also, I mean, I understand that you're saying that you were able to go out for the first time, but also there is, of course, there's going to be other implications as the time goes by, and especially with the next slow lunar eclipse right now, that's going to add more to this realization of what exactly that is that new, because it's almost like a new level of this opening of the energy that happened in 2004, right? So
Yeah.
whether you're going to be doing more of I'm not gonna there's no need of prediction, but it's the opening of, and again releasing whatever the fears or whatever was there that was holding the energy to open up and to express itself. And so it's a good thing to ponder, and again, especially with the coming up of the new lunar eclipse, because it's in that Pisces, and it also hits your Mars, right?
Right.
So yeah, so we have the axis of Taurus and Scorpio, and of course it's happening in different in 11th house, but still, considering it's almost like the release of what is holding something there, if there is still something that's holding, and then following that the impulse that has made you get out and be with people for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I feel like a lot of it is about moving on, furthering my art, getting it out more in the world in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, this is not about the next eclipse, but the idea is that what is empowering you.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. What I said about that eclipse is, what did I say? It feels like the end of the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's a really actually very, very interesting way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have anything to say about the Aries in the 12? I mean, I understand that the Aries has probably had it's more like the expression during the time that you were working and in that job, and maybe early when you were telling your mom that you're not angry, you're what was it, pissed or mad?
I'm mad. Yeah.
But it has a prominent position too, that in and it's also kind of close to the North Node.
Oh yeah, very close. The midheaven is, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my take on it is I think, and I've seen it with some of my with a couple of clients in particular, that I think Aries is not not always the way people portray it. And that may have been, my problem with having, with thinking that I had an Aries midheaven. So, that I didn't understand, that there are different traits and characteristics of Aries than what I had in my head of being, aggressive and just the instinctual and things like that. That I think there's more to it than what what everybody says. So
Yeah, the idea of identity, of
mhm.
my own identity, my own way, my own. It doesn't need to be angry. But it needs to get angry if it hasn't been angry.
Well, yeah, and especially when it's filtered through Scorpio, the my interpretation of Aries is filtered through Scorpio because of my Mars in Scorpio. So I guess that colors it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Robin, I do apologize. I misspelled your name. So it's going to show up as that way.
That's fine.
I'm very sorry. So I will again ask you the same question. Have you felt that in the area of, I mean, of course we know how fourth house is not only home, but it's the place that we call home and the place within us that gives us that emotional security and everything that translates into. Have you found yourself in a state where there is some sense of not enoughness there, or something has not come to the full expression?
I guess I've been feeling a little stuck with wanting to be home too much and feeling like I'm not getting out enough because I don't want to, but I feel like I need to and should. So I've kind of been battling with that. And
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, and in 2004 is when I first started making plans and getting myself situated to move out from my like a 25-year long relationship with my partner and move out on my own. So, but for this time, yeah, I'm just more dealing with feeling that kind of a battle with I want to be home, but I feel like it's not good to be home so much.
But okay, so it's almost like one part of me wants to, but one part of me thinks that it's probably not.
Yeah.
So do you feel the call to go to see people again, to meet friends, or it's a different thing?
No, like I need to get out and get more involved with people, because I guess since COVID, like a lot of people, I've kind of let myself get used to being more isolated and home.
So there's a call to actually attend to one of very important needs that you have, but there is also this thing that you don't, and because you've gotten used to, again, we're talking about what we get used to when certain situation is repeating.
Yeah, because on my Gemini, I kind of like to be more out and involved with people.
Yeah, so it must have been difficult over the last couple of years in that sense, or not necessarily for you, considering what we went through.
Yeah. Well, and I retired during this past year too, so that also has had me home more.
Yeah. So again, to act on any desire that we have, it requires, engagement of our Martian function, right? And so the Mars in your chart / life happens to be in that third house, right? And it's also retrograde, and it's in Pisces. And so, not that I have to tell you what it is, but so and of course, all the dynamics from Pluto and the nodes and all that have filtered through that Mars. And have you felt in your life, and probably that's not the case anymore, because we live and learn, where you were not able to necessarily be able to be understood or express your thoughts, or
Yeah.
So what was the feeling there, that if you do it, what's going to happen, or it was just something that's coming?
Well, especially it squares my Virgos, or opposes my Virgo, and squares my Gemini. I always second guess everything and feel, I don't know, just uncomfortable. A lot of it also, it's like an overload sometimes, I think, and all the thoughts get too jammed up and I can't get them out.
You can't even differentiate what it has to. Yeah. So did you have anything else to say in regards to that, or because I think I interrupted?
No, I was going to say that I think Mars is kind of like a difficult point in my chart, because I'm a day birth also, so.
In terms of difficult because you haven't been able to grasp the function. I myself have felt that way all the time, even though in the books is very well delineated. It means this and this and this and this, and yet I wasn't able to figure it out, especially when it says it's the conscious desires or something like this. It's like, I don't see how I have conscious desires to do this and this and this. So it's been very difficult for me to figure it out. And probably that's why, and unbeknownst to me, before I started doing the preparation for this one, I realized that last year around this time, I did a presentation on Mars. And then,
right.
And then what is this telling you? Well, there is something in me that wants to understand that function.
Yeah, I remember that.
So, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because we cannot live without the Martian function, right? I mean, you're born and you start crying.
Yeah.
So the Martian function is something that really connects her to really, again, the currents of life. And if we want to feel good in a certain way, it's natural to go ahead and take the actions to do that, regardless of what that feeling good is. And for us not to be able to understand this, I mean, not only us, I'm sure there's a lot of people, not to get a grasp of that is very interesting. And it's very interesting the way you're describing it, considering that it's in Pisces. It has the Pisces overlay. So I don't want to go into something that you don't want to share, but I want to ask the general question as to, do you feel like you, I mean, at certain times, you don't necessarily know what you like or what you don't like, or it doesn't come up like that?
No, I know what I like, but I am very indecisive. It's hard to make decisions. I feel so scattered because I like too many things, so it's hard to know where to focus.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, considering that this full moon falls in that fourth house, do you feel that has it happened, or It doesn't need to be something that is tangible, like you get up and you go somewhere, or you all of a sudden start doing certain improvements in your home, or something. Not like this, but just pondering upon certain ways of you acting in a different way, or certain ways in which you felt different way. I'm not sure if that's even clear what I'm asking, but have you found yourself during this eclipse time, not eclipse time, but the one that's triggered by the new moon in Aries, that you have gotten some insight on certain way of acting, or certain way of initiating things that you want? You mentioned that you felt that you want to go out more, but at the same time you have this pull to be at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess just getting, thinking about it and looking at different ways as to why or what stands in my way.
Mm-hmm.
So, examining what stands in my way.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And that examination is going, I'm not asking for details, I'm just asking, have you are you finding certain ideas, or certain it's almost like looking at the big picture and seeing and identifying certain things?
yeah, it's more just like identifying.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I guess you would look at the moon too, right? Because it's the
Right.
fourth house. And the moon's in Gemini, and you look at Mars, and Mars is in the third house.
Right.
So there is a strong Gemini component there.
Yes, yes, yes.
Um, so, yeah, I've, just been putting a lot of thought into what I said, how I want to push myself to get out more.
Mm. And because getting out is giving you something that is identified as something that you need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to fulfill the Gemini.
You haven't been able to provide this to you for some reason or another, or you found yourself in a position where you haven't been given this to yourself.
Right.
So you get to do that. Do you have you, because the Aries, just to address Aries too, is in the third house, and it's in a very different, well, it's fire sign, but it that's not Pisces, and it's also not Gemini, and it's Aries. And do you feel, or have you felt connected to that place? What is your relationship to anger has been?
I let it go.
Mm.
I don't hold on to anger.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I don't recognize it, but what I do, I let go of. That Mars and Pisces passivity.
Yeah. Have you because that's probably the last thing that we can kind of touch on. It looks like the identification that you actually need to go out more is because staying home and going out are to almost like opposing things, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a very Geminian way, because it's this and this and this and this, and it could be those different things, but then you find them within yourself, right? And so it looks like that new moon is a little bit of a push to,
Right.
again, identify those things and be okay with those things, and see which will prevail in terms of, just because there are two opposite things, that doesn't mean that they cannot be fulfilled, right? So you're basically because the new moon and the way it's affecting our lives, it contains within itself the actionary idea, and it connects to our Mars, right? And so it's in the 3rd house, right? And it's also in Pisces, so that can give it this oh, what's the point of acting and all that, or I can differentiate those thoughts. But you did say that, and you're realizing that there were those thoughts that were coming to you in terms of what feels like home. Well, like home, it feels like I can stay at home, but also to me, to feel at home, meaning to like what I like. Another thing that I like is also to go out, and that's okay. I can sustain those two, because they both are something that I feel that I need.
Right. Yeah. The eclipse was opposite my Neptune,
Right.
10th.
Yeah. Mhm.
So
Yeah. So you, of course, I mean, the action of the eclipse hasn't stopped, and it's going to continue over the last whatever months, and then there's going to be another one that is potentially going to give you more aha moments onto how what is the natural expression of you, and how to what has been stopping that natural expression, and when you're acting on the desires, how this is making you feel more secure, even if those are opposing desires.
I don't know. I suppose fear.
Fear of?
I don't know. A lot of fears of. I don't know that I can even identify them all.
But that's the thing. You don't have to identify them all.
Yeah.
You can, one is fine, or 5, or 1.5.
Yeah, it's like I haven't been wanting to go through the trouble. It seems like it's too much effort.
Right. Of course. But again, then moving just one step further, what constitutes trouble?
Well, I live a little kind of far away from things, so it takes more energy and time to get places, and just wanting to put that time and energy into doing it. It's like part of me really wants to, and part of me doesn't.
Okay. Well, there's a way to deal with this, actually, because if you're waiting for both parts to want it, then you're gonna find yourself in stuck, because that may not happen. But to start satisfying each part at a time, even though the other part will not be satisfied, that's something that you may try to do.
Yeah, I think it's like a lot of people, since COVID, have just gotten too comfortable with staying home.
Yeah, but if you think about that particular happening, some of us, or many of us, yes, well, there was the fear, right? But the fear is not a natural cause to suppress action. And so just because we stayed at home, that doesn't mean that that was the natural thing that our deep self wanted to do.
Right.
We learned how to do it, but it wasn't something that we naturally, because naturally we were social beings and we want to attend to our own actions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is another thing that was added to, and of course right now it's a habit. And as we know, habit is not necessarily something that serves us. It's
Right.
something we're used to, right? And it feels secure. Why wouldn't we feel secure? But there is this one part, you know, that seed inside the primal brain that is wanting its own thing. And this is the little spur in that fourth house saying, well, in order for you to feel cozy and nice, the other thing is that that other part has not been expressed. And so to you, it comes as a surprise. Well, I want to stay home. I really want to stay home, but I also want to go out. But those, and that is what's coming right now. But then the habit is there, and it's like, yeah, why? It's too much energy. But the fact that it's coming is an idea. Maybe that's as an idea so far. I don't know how far you've gone through execute it. It's
Well, that's the seed, right?
yeah.
And so,
It's in where is it coming from? It's not coming from me. It's coming from within you.
mhm.
So it's part of all those currents that have been a little bit of like sleeping. So the idea in this case is just to see when they come, where they're gonna get you. And because again, the way Mars, Martian energy, we talk about conscious desires, it's not conscious desires. They're desires, they're emanating from exactly those parts of us that are deeply ingrained in the habit. And so the more we do the same thing, the more we find ourselves in the same reality, right? But we want to experience a different reality, and that is it's not a wake-up call. It's just something that reminds you of this other part of you that has not been expressed. And that's the idea, for that part to get this expression. And so it has to fight with a habit. It has to fight with what's established in terms of how we've been acting. And of course, it's going to come as an idea, or sometimes it's going to come as an urge, or but just because it's coming, it's not something that we should, let go of, but actually keep a good record of, because when we start doing it, more of it is going to start coming. And that's a vital part of who you are. Otherwise, it's not going to come through you.
Mhm.
And so the idea is, do I want to check out on those desires?
I think I use this Aries eclipse to motivate to break out of my comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
like since I retired a few months ago, I've just gotten so comfortable with staying home, but it's not good to
But that's
indulge too
interesting
much.
that if you're comfortable with staying home, where is this idea that you need to go out more comes from?
So that I don't become too isolated, and it's important to have connections and be involved, I think,
Mm-hmm.
with people outside of the internet and family.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't happen if you just stay home.
Yes, it doesn't.
So, when I was working, I was out, more. And so I guess I should just not let myself settle into being too comfortable with staying home.
Yeah, but the idea is not to do it because of what other people are thinking or what the general opinion
Oh
is.
yeah, no, it's not. It doesn't have anything to do with other people. It has to do with what I feel my own inner needs for security are.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's important. That's the very important part. Yeah,
Because it's insecure to not feel connected.
exactly. Exactly.
And so in order to get out of that insecurity and build some, foundations for security, it's important to get out and connect with people more.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. And so that's the another piece of you that's coming and is bringing this.
Right, because also, I mean, there's the 10th house, and in order to manifest anything in the 10th house, you have to get out in the world and be seen.
Mhm.
Although I'm Neptune there, so I'm not that fond of being seen, but
Because but Neptune is in 28 degrees something, right?
Libra, yeah.
So 28 is almost like 29.
Hmm.
So there is this, it's almost like the moon, you know, the eclipse,
Right,
something around that. Again, what does that mean to not being seen for who you are out in the world, that's coming to culmination?
right, yeah, because it's really pretty exactly almost opposite that Neptune.
Right. And it's almost and it's also squaring Venus and
Hmm.
in the, yeah. So there's a call for actually becoming secure in that.
Right.
And it's part of your Venusian nature to want to experience, you know, those the connection with people. You cannot deny it. Well, how it has been done in the past, it's different issue. You know, I mean, it's a very sensitive point, that Venus in Cancer, right?
Hmm.
It's not too. It could be it could be very, you know, sensitive to those other people with which it wants to connect. It wants to have a conversation and all that, and then it's easy to lose yourself, considering the past dynamics, right? But again, the connection is important, as you're realizing, and it's part of you. It's part of something that you want and you like, and it's part again of this current that is Robin. So the suppression of that current leads you nowhere. I mean, leads you to, again, this the old, you're already used to being secluded. So there's a reason why this idea is coming up right now, especially because it's like, okay, I tried to push her on this way and I tried to make her move and she's just staying there, and it's a 29 degree and 50 minutes Aries. It's like, no, I'm going there. And so the idea produces itself. And of course, the first thing that we do with the idea is, no. But that's the thing, and it's gonna enrich itself more and more as you're open. The idea is just to be open to that and see where it leads you. Then that Venus is not going to change sign. It's not going to change, well, by progression or by transit, but in your life, it's in the 7th house.
Hmm.
So it's an intrinsic need. And it's supposed to have that security to go out and express itself and connect to people, you know. I mean, so it's whatever is calling you, it's going to keep calling you. That's the thing, you can't run away from it. Yeah. I think we can call it for tonight. Thank you for your willingness to share your charts and to let me talk about it.
Thank
Kamelia,
Mhm.
Annie is here. I don't know if you've if you're finished or if you want to keep going. I'll leave it up to you. If you want to do it another time, but she did get here a little while ago.
We can do it either way, because the video may become too long. We can, you know,
Yeah.
not word, if that's okay.
That-
I mean, I don't mind going over.
That's
the-
not a problem. I mean, the length of the video is not an issue. I mean, we some of them go a lot longer than this. So, I mean, if you want to go another 15 minutes or so,
Okay.
that's okay with me. And
Okay.
especially since she's here.
Okay, sure. Yeah, we can do that.
Cool.
Okay. I'm gonna, yeah, this is the chart. And do I have a, because I don't see her, Annie, are you here?
I'm going to have to ask, let me ask you to unmute, Annie. And then you should be able to try it
There
now.
we go. Yeah, it wouldn't let me do it. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. So I actually was studying every chart talk with asking if, so based on where this eclipse is falling in the chart, because I mean, of course, it happens to be in the 10th house here. So the question I started to talk with is there a, so that's the area of the life, right? So is there anything around how you are expressing yourself out there in the world, or around your authority, or around how you see yourself, that you have felt like it's not fully expressed, or there is some there is certain unsatisfaction around issues that are connecting to that 10th house?
No, I was dissatisfied, so I decided to step it up and take on a few more contracts that would put me in the public eye and push myself out there and do things in a way that I wouldn't normally do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fairly social, but I can also hold up like Robin and kind of be in a mole in a hole and do all of that. And I've been working solo for the last 5 years, so COVID was just a blink of an eye for me. It was like, okay, business as usual. And I got a little tired of that. So I wanted to be out.
So you were on a roll pretty much over the last couple of years. Is that what you're saying, or it was just recent that you?
No, I was working solo for the last 5 years and working virtually. So as you can imagine, everybody was at home. And so I was at home, but it was normal for me because I was just working.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a little annoyed with that. And I said, I'm just tired of this and I want to get out. And I kind of want to make an impression with what I'm doing. I feel like I'm sitting on a lot of, how do I say this? I'm not expressing myself fully. How can I best do that? And so I found venues in which to be able to do some of it, but not nearly as much as I'd like, or not nearly in the ways that I like. EA really allows me to do more of that. So I'm grateful for this opportunity.
So have you been, so but it's kind of happening right now, is what you're saying, or because this eclipse, of course, I mean the effect of the eclipse could be felt a little earlier or later, or it can continue for a while, but so sometimes, because it's the 29 degree, right? So it's still, it's almost like it's not the last chance, but it's a place where it's almost like you do it or you don't do it. And it's like when you've been postponing to sign up for a class or something for the entirety of the whatever period was until the due date, and the due date comes, and then at that moment you actually realize, well, no, I'm going to go for it, or I'm not going to go for it. But it's like, it's the pressing point. And so considering that this is the urge to do something, or to have you found yourself expressing yourself, and it looks like you're pretty comfortable with that energy. And
I am.
Yeah.
I am. I always have a loud mouth, and I'm always out there trying to express something, because that's just normal and natural. And I have a really hard time sitting on stuff. If I have to sit on stuff, I just get quiet and go away.
So considering that this was again the eclipse, have you found yourself doing something different, or you have found yourself in acting in a way that you haven't acted before, or you have had some revelation in terms of the way you've gone around about things?
No, I think I'm pretty consistent.
Mm-hmm.
I'm daily pushing myself out there and to do more, and to do it more consciously. So with greater and greater self-awareness, which leads to greater and greater self-definition, which I realize is more separating than conjoining. But as long as you're aware of that, you know, you can ride that line and that fine balance and go back and forth between definition and moving back into all that is. It's a very interesting walk.
Right. So when you're saying more separating, you're saying that the more you define yourself, the more you become different than other people. I mean, in that way, or you had something else in mind?
The more I define myself, the more aware I become of my uniqueness.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, the more I feel embraced by the whole.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost paradoxical. The more one defines oneself, the more realize, at least for me, the more I realize that I am what is.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an expanded awareness from that activity.
That's interesting what you're saying, because of course you know that you have all these very special transits going on right now, the Chiron and the moon, and then Pluto on the Chiron, and then Saturn on the south, on the north node. And we are also looking at the Uranus in the 12th house, Cancer. And I'm specifically bringing this out because specifically what you said was very interesting. The more you define yourself, the more you understand that you're part of and loved and all that. We were talking about something, I don't know, at one point you joined in, that the self-expression is something, of course, we know extremely important. And of course we've lived through lives or childhood where that expression has been suppressed. But what is the self-expression is actually the normal urge to be who you are. And of course, who you are may not be liked by other people or the family because they have their own issues, but it's what you came here to be. And because that's the idea, that's why ultimately you're loved, not by people that have issues with you, but by the for the lack of a better word, we'll call it source, right? Because we're emanation of that source. And so we've lost the connection with it. And of course we're replacing our trust and our dependency on other people for the sake of love. But we can only feel that love when we are having the bravery to go ahead and do and follow those currents. And so I was just looking at this Uranus in the 12th house in Cancer, and how the transformation of, well, we know that Uranus can mean trauma, right? And how this transformation of what you're saying is coming about, that the more you're, that's how you said it, the more you're expressing yourself and defining yourself, the more you feel that connection, if I am interpreting it the right way. Or maybe...
I think you are. I think you are. I think that's very true. I think we are here to express ourselves, to live to our fullest, whatever our intention for that is to be, as an expression of source energy. And in doing so, defining our uniqueness if we care to observe it.
And not only that, but we can only give without feeling depletion and fully, again, without feeling depletion, if we are acting who we are, because the fullest we become in and full with what we are really, and develop those qualities, then that naturally there is nowhere to go but to give to others. And so from that place, that definition is very rewarding. But I was gonna ask you, I mean, considering that Chiron is in that house, down there in the 6th house, and now that Chiron has gone all the way through, and it's on the moon, right? So and you feel that urge to absolutely go full into that expression. Do you feel, I mean, can you tell, and I would like to not put words in your mouth, but do you what are your thoughts about, because the Chiron is a wound, and so, and it has something to do, and it's a translation of the trauma or the traumatic point and all that. And of course, it's in the 6th house, and it's the house of what you're doing, and how you become, useful to others, or how, the obligations have turned into obligations opposed to dharma. And it's interesting again that this Chiron right now is right on the moon. Do you feel a resolution to that point, or maybe a different? Well, I wanted to say a healing of that point, but I'm not sure if that's how you would call it.
No, that's a good question. And I think that because I did not feel a resolution, I surrendered to the notion that the resolution is in going full tilt and just moving into both the pain, well, moving into what's perceived as pain.
Mm-hmm.
And within that, one might find healing.
Right. Yeah. You find, because we're also looking at where Aries is in the chart, because it resonates energetically speaking to the divine discontent, right? And so it looks like in this chart is on the MC, and it's also in very close. It's like almost Jupiter and it are the same, in the same spot. And of course, Chiron was there, not so. I mean, it was a long time ago, but have you felt in your life, and of course that has hopefully has changed, the how was the expression of anger, although that's not the only, I mean, we have to also look at Mars, but have you felt comfortable with expression of anger, or do you connect to the expression of anger?
It's easy, it's accessible, and it's overflowing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's an LOL. And a lot of times I wish it weren't quite that way, but I feel that whatever is there for a reason. So it's there to be revealed, whether it's anger, whether it's joy, whether it's whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. The point is it's there to be explored, which really combines well with the Jupiter at the MC. And the more one explores, the more one can choose to reveal, or oftentimes the more things are revealed, whether that feels like a choice or not. And that to me is part of the Quranic healing that's sitting on the moon right now.
Yeah. I mean, obviously that actually, I mean, regardless of how it's classified, the expression of anger in your life through by yourself, regardless of how it's again using the word classified by others, it's an important part of your recovering something, considering that it's all, the MC and Jupiter is there, and also we have I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Mercury as a skip step. I don't like particularly the skip step term, but
there's a gap in sequencing. How about that?
Okay, yeah, okay. I actually really like that.
I've always liked that. I made that up, but yeah, there is a gap in sequencing, and so part of this lifetime, I think it's relatively recent, is to put the pedal to the metal and just explore what there is to be explored, so that I can be authentic and not be hiding out with the trauma, whatever that might have been, Uranus in the 12th.
The other thing is looking at the Mars, because that's the natural urge for expression. It's also the place where initially gets many things could happen, but one of them is suppressed or manipulated if we don't hold the expression, if we don't learn how to. So yeah, as you know, because it's in a 3rd house and it's in Virgo, have you felt that in that expression, of course, Virgo doesn't give it a good feel. You mentioned that you don't have an issue with the expression of anger, but that has to do also with some sort of Virgonian element there. And so in that way, have you felt that the expression of your energy in that area has been abused?
By me, by others, or
Yeah.
is that just a general question?
By others?
Early on in this lifetime, yes.
Okay.
Early on, well, in other lifetimes, in lifeline, yes, as well. In this lifetime, I feel that it's been my greatest asset. So I want to utilize it to the best of my ability. But what comes along with Mars in Virgo is a lot of anxiety. And so there's a very fine balancing act for me to ensure that I can utilize what's available to me and not get too caught up in the shadow side of that.
So the fact that it contains the idea of discernment, it's actually becoming very, very useful for you of how to use the energy.
If I pay attention to the need for discernment, which I pretty much, sorry about that sound, need to do most of the time, then the answer is yes.
If you are going to, I mean, again, it looks like you have a good connection with the anger, anger per se. I mean, of course, your anger. Do you find this healing, or it's always been like that, or it hasn't been like this always?
Would you mind specifying, do I find which healing?
The connection that you have with anger, because you're mentioning that that's not an issue for you.
I found it extraordinarily useful. I feel like I might succumb to being a victim were it not for the anger. And at times I can feel that way anyway. So the anger pulls me up out of that.
Okay. That's interesting to listen to the way you put it, because just for the idea of, the paradigm of the issue with the sequencing, and the fact that issue with the sequences is through, again, if we're sticking to the paradigm, the resolution node happens to be the south node, and it has to do a lot with Virgo. So interestingly, it looks like that Chiron on the moon and your actions that you're taking right now, especially in the area of your work, is the right path. Is there anything that you feel like is an issue, or something is a stumbling block, or something that you feel like it's not coming up right? I don't get things, but
yeah, I've been dealing with an issue for 3 years that I've never had to deal with in my life. And it could make me want to punch holes in a wall, and it makes me more determined to get it resolved. And every other 13 seconds I'm thinking, okay, now I'm just going to surrender to this and it will dissolve. And then I'm back up on my soapbox waving my fists in the air, and then I'm back to surrender, and then it's exhausting.
So the issue that has manifested, because we were talking earlier about how we whatever happens in whatever situation we find ourselves in a predicament or interaction with somebody that is not going exactly the way we want to, or it's not really good for us, it's a manifestation of some sort, right? So we are put in a position that we have to deal with it. We can't run away. We're talking about those situations. Looks like you're talking about a situation like this. So that usually is I like to call it Saturnian point, because this Saturn has to do with the, you have the boundaries of consciousness. And of course, if something has been off of in the field that was not really in the focus, it's out of consciousness. So right now, through that situation that has occurred and you find yourself in, and you can't run away, there is elements of certain facets of ourselves that we're not necessarily conscious about. I don't know if you have a tendency to look at things from that perspective, but if you do, and I don't know if there's time, or that's probably the time, but if you look at that situation from that perspective, the idea is just to see what is it that's been unknown for you as far as yourself, that needed you to have the situation so that you can see certain things.
Well, I endorse that perspective. And I think part of it's due to trauma. Part of it's due to, and I'm going to say past life as well as maybe current life, which follows suit anyway to what's come before. So it's all the same in many ways. And I've usually been able to solve just about any issue in my life. And so to not be able to solve something or resolve it means it needs a higher level of awareness. So my trajectory has been to exalt my level of awareness wherever possible, so as to decondition from whatever comes up and to ensure that I'm not creating more conditioning.
Yeah. There is a right way to go, of course, and that's what we want. The reason, I want to put it lightly, but especially with somebody, and most of us, they're really geared towards getting this all these facets of consciousness, putting the pieces together, putting the sequences in the right order so that it doesn't create all kinds of bumps. But still, we're not getting it because something is missing. Obviously, it's missing. We're open to getting it, and yet we find ourselves sometimes in situations that are ridiculous. At least that's how it looks. I mean, I do all this work. It's not about it. The mentality is not why it's not fair. It's not. It's like, what was that? Why? So when a situation like that's not going to be very consoling, but that's not the idea. I just want to give you a different perspective, which probably you already have. Maybe that's going to be a reminder. So the reason when we find a situation like this, the crazy thing is that through the resolution that we've exhausted all the other ways of gaining the higher consciousness. And it's going to be through the unpleasant Virgonian way of going through the motions in that situation where that higher consciousness is going to come. It's very interesting if you think of materialization and Saturn. Again, the situation the situation is not going to get locked up until there's all kinds of priming. Okay, we can do this way and 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 this way. We've exhausted what we know so far, but there is certain issue that's missing and we're not aware of it. And for God's sakes, nobody else can help us with that perspective. And that's when we're locked into the situation, the immediacy of the situation, and we have to go through step after step after step after step so that we can get the bigger picture eventually, or the abstract idea of what this was about. It's very unpleasant, but it's almost like we've exhausted everything before that, and there was not a situation like this before, and I was not able to get into or to ask or to see. So Saturn comes in some way, and then the situation is locked in. And it's almost like the way we're manifesting those lives, right? It's like we're locking ourselves in certain parameter, time frame, where we forget about everything else, because through the life we have to get something on a very abstract level, or it's the same thing. It's like this situation it's a miniature situation in our lives. Okay, we're locked into this crazy situation and we have to get something through going through the motions of it. So I don't know how that sounds to you. It's not, again, consoling in any way, but it's an interesting way in which it learns, and you can reflect on that when you look at certain experiences that you have from your life, and you look at them and you're like, how could I put myself in that situation? Or that was really crazy. I could have avoided. You could have avoided from the state of consciousness that you are in right now, but you couldn't have avoided from that state of consciousness there. So I don't know if it's clear what I'm saying, but what I want
Very clear. And I agree with you. And part of the frustration and the Aries discussion that we're having this evening, for me, that gets triggered is all about knowing that.
Yeah.
And not being able to change that.
Right.
And that's like the gold nugget in the middle of all this is, and that's what Aries wants to do with that. Blow it up. And you can't. And at the same time, we recognize Saturn as the limits of consciousness. But at the same time, I recognize that every problem has within it, contained within it, a solution. So the frustration is augmented because I know this, and I also know that the limits of consciousness under which I operate, whether I agree to or not, and at some level, obviously I do, reinforces the limitations. And so it's all very annoying.
I agree, especially with the strong Aryan signature. That could be absolutely
maddening.
Yes.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. I think it's not all I have to say, but I think that considering the topic, unless you want to say or ask something. Again, I'm not asking for a point of ask me something and I'll tell you what it is.
No, it's good. I think you've covered a lot, and we could really talk all night here about dissecting all of this. But it truly just is what it is, and I think you've really done a good job of putting a container around the energy, which with Aries requires focus, and at the same time wants to break that focus apart and say, no, I don't need to focus on that. I want to do this over here, and I want to do that over here. And if I do that over here, and, but that's not particularly useful in this situation. So I think you've done a good job of highlighting the archetype.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you feel that way. Again, thank you very much, every one of you, that you decided to give me the opportunity to talk about those things, which I absolutely passionately love in an Aryan way.
Well, I hope it was useful for you as well.
Yeah, it's a learning experience always, as you know.
Thank you, Kamelia. That was wonderful. Your insights were well received and right on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Kamelia.
Okay. Bye.